It was 4 o'clock, but it looks like it's 4 o'clock, so I guess go green on the microphone. And I'd like to call to order the November 18th regularly scheduled BPW board meeting. Start with invocation. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. We thank you for the work of others that gives us breadth and depth to our own work. Be with us as we move forward, rejoicing with you and supporting one another. We ask you this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, looks like we need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Comments from the audience? Nobody signed up? If we could move right into Darren's general manager report.
Well, I hope I can kind of call this a feel-good report. We've got a couple of items that have happened at our last MPUA annual conference. It was over a month ago. We received a couple of awards. First of all, talking about our safety award. This has mainly to do with our electric as they look through the APPA, but they also look at the water and sewer and everything else. If you look at our mission, we bring the Hannibal Board of Public Works is to provide safe, reliable utility products with excellent customer service at reasonable prices. And that safety is something that we want to make more than just simply a burden. Sometimes when you get out there in the field, safety issues, making sure there's the proper flagging, making sure there's proper barricades, everything that has to go on. If you get into dirt deeper than 5 feet, you need to have shoring or you need to have it cut and protect you from the soil cave-ins. When it comes to the electric, you don't ever make the second mistake twice. It can be absolutely lethal just on the first one. And so we have to absolutely maintain the highest standards. And so that safe utilities that we provide is not just what we provide to the community, but it's especially to our workers that are here and that are ours. And so we have a award of having a perfect safety record for 2023. And what's fun is we've got a few others that we've already received in the past. And so there's actually something you worry about, that because you've gotten a perfect record, sometimes you become lax again. Oh, we're so good at it, but we don't. We're continuing to step forward. We've put into play what's called tailgate meetings. So as you go out into the field, you send out a crew to do something. They stop before it's all done, before it even begins, and say, all right, what are the issues that we need to look at? And we make that a cultural mindset rather than something that may, if I get caught without my hard hat, Matt Munslinger is going to really be ticked off and going to, no, I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to put my vest on because it's the right thing to do. And it becomes automatic and it becomes a culture. We're still working at that, but we're getting closer and closer, and we're pretty happy to report it. I will knock on wood because, again, you don't want to get so good we're lax. But in a second, I'm going to ask you to stand up. We'll take a picture of you with our safety award. The second thing I would like to talk about is that for my report, it says our greatest asset is our employees. And we have nothing but fantastic employees. We expect a lot of them. One of the awards that was given was the System Improvements Award. This was the MPUA Robert Williams System Achievement Award. And throughout the state, there was one person that received that award, and that was Matt Munslinger. And he's been the director of operations since 2021. He's been employed since 2007. And I will simply tell you that when anybody needs to remember where's the file, what's the history, etc., Matt's got it, or he knows where to find it, and he can do it in a timely manner. He's pretty important to us. Some of the things that he's overseen the construction of the GAC at the filter plant for $9.5 million, which is for potable water for the entire system. And we're grateful for that work that he did there. We've had a reduction in wastewater overflows. Again, the crews have been out there. They've been working on taking and videoing and doing all of the CIPP repairs for that system, and we see the results of that. We look at the electric distribution. We've increased the tree trimming. That has been a absolute decision that was made. And with that, we've seen the amount of cost for call-outs, the amount of emergency cost if we do have such things happen. We had a tree that fell on the line. Well, that tree was a long way away from our easement, so we couldn't have touched it. And it happened to be that a couple of human beavers are the one that actually cut the tree down to cause the problem in the first place. So there's some things that we can't avoid, but because of Matt's vision, we've been able to move forward. He's also the one that's running the North Street project. That's a city project. City received the grant, but he's the one kind of ramrodding and making sure that that one's happening the way it should. And we have several other projects that he's also involved in. We'll talk about some of those later. So with that, we've gotten an award for Matt as the Robert Williams System Achievement Award. And so thank you, Matt. We'll just...
Very nice.
Now, we've got the sign up and we have someone here that can take a picture. John, could I ask that you award that to Matt, and we'll take a picture of it? And if there's any other board members that would like to join, that would be fantastic. That'd be great.
You got a smile, Bill.
So we personally have anything to do with it.
No, it's his. Your leadership is what counts.
Congratulations.
Ready?
Hey, congratulations.
Just have those there for you, whatever you'd like. Put them up for you. And that's the end of my report, unless there's questions.
All right, anybody have questions of Darren about his monthly report? Having heard none, we'll go to man of the hour, Matt Mudslinger. Congratulations, that's great.
Thank you. You'll see in our board report, we've had a long list of outages this past month. Our overall outage, our overall availability stayed the same at the 99.993. A lot of squirrels, several unknowns. We're continuing to work with getting squirrel guards or animal guards in place. Hopefully reduce the number of squirrel and bird outages. We had to place a new order, and so that's what took a while getting those new squirrel guards in to get in place. We did continue to work with the viaduct contractor and get that project completed. We did several switching so it didn't impact our customers, but allowed them to get the pumper trucks or the cranes in there where they needed to. And we actually got a nice letter from the project manager detailing the ease at which we were able to work with the contractor and provide them a better product in a more timely manner. We did have one mutual aid event that occurred. I think we brought it up last month. Mutual aid request was for Florida. We went from the 7th through the 14th of October, and the crew consisted of 5 linemen, a pickup truck, a small bucket truck, a large bucket truck, and a digger derrick. We also had one wind event here. As Darren mentioned earlier, we have increased our tree trimming, which reduced the number of outages we had on the late evening of October 30th. Had that, I know Quincy saw 80-mile-an-hour wind gust at their airport. We had no trees that I would consider in the easement that caused the outages. We had a couple tops break out of trees that were located in trees outside the easement, and so we don't have the ability to trim them. We had one stretch of primary that was down over on Ben Lomond. Everything else was relegated to services. We had one instance where somebody's rubber roofing blew off their back porch, got wrapped around their service, and ripped it off from the house. And so that wind event happened around 11:30 at night. By 8 a.m. the next morning, we had a majority of the people back on. By the end of the day on Halloween, we had maybe 8 or 10 people who were still without power, but at no fault of ours. They were required to have an electrician come in, reinstall the box on their house, and get everything acceptable before we could hook them back up. So, jumping into the water plant, our production numbers seem to be right in line with what the previous years are. We met with Black and Veatch and Vanaventer on our programming. We've had some change in programming over the past few years since the plan has been brought online in 2020. And so we're bringing them back in to make sure that we know exactly what changes have been made and get those changes documented and make sure our operators understand exactly how those changes impact the rest of the system, and just so that we have a good record and can efficiently operate the plant. They're also looking at the wastewater plant, which was last updated in 2014, 2015. GAC, we exchanged 2 vessels in the first week in November. Again, that's something we're trying to monitor as it is expensive, but we need to get that level of service out of that material, and so we're working with the vendors on that to make sure that we're doing the best we can to extend the life of the media before it is being sent back for regeneration. As far as the water distribution side of things, we're still chasing water loss, and so our crew went out and listened on valves that separate 2 pressure zones, our high pressure zone versus our low pressure zone, and make sure water is not leaking between them. They did find several instances where that was occurring, and they're on the schedule to get dug up when we can. Several of them are in areas where maybe it might be around a school, to where we try to do it at a time when there's less traffic, as it is not necessarily an emergency event, but we want to get that done. Sewer system, it was a dry month, and that's reflects in our flow. Average day flow, we're down about 2.6 million gallons a day. We finalized the clarifier 3 repairs in September, allowed us to take clarifier 2 down. We had an electrical issue. That bridge rotates around and pushes all that sludge on the bottom toward the middle and pulls the scum off the top. There was an issue where that conduit that housed that electrical line had been compromised, thus shorting out, and the bridge wasn't moving. So by getting clarifier 3 back into service, we were able to take clarifier 2 down and do the rehab and get it returned to service. Wastewater collection, the big thing we did during the month of October was manhole raising. That's an annual event now. And so every year, the street department goes out and paves streets. We've tried to raise manholes before the paving has occurred in the past, and you just don't get very good ride quality. It never just matches exactly. And so what we do is we'll mark the manhole. The street department will come in and pave the street at the angle and slope that they want to pave it. And then we'll come back and cut that manhole out. I don't know if you've seen any of the asphalt streets. Looks like a concrete donut around the manhole lid. That's where we come in. We got a piece of equipment that'll cut a 54, 56 inch circle. We take it down to a good part of the manhole, and then we pour that back with concrete. That way we're reducing the impact to drivers on the street, because it's a smoother surface at that point. But we're also sealing out any water that would come in normally through that chimney portion of the manhole and doesn't need to be treated. And so we're able to seal that out. I would say since we started that, we've probably raised, 1,000 or 2,000 manholes over the years. So it's something that's really saved time compared to the old method where we send a crew out with the large air compressor and a jackhammer, and they'd have to jackhammer a square out and after they cut it and bring it up. So it actually provides a real good product. Technology-wise, we worked with NISC. Darren spoke last month about having to send out the lead service line letters. Last Friday was the deadline for those to go out, and so we worked with NISC to do a mass mailing of those letters, and they went out last Friday because we're getting calls today. So then we continue to upgrade technology equipment and install newer software, and then you got the report from what the business office completed this past month. So that's all I've got for the operations report, unless you all have any questions. I'll be happy to answer.
Anybody have questions? No? Do not. So if you move into projects, that'd be wonderful.
All right, gravity filter media replacement. We are now working on filter number 4. Filter 3 was returned to service right around the 18th of October, and so filter 4 has been demoed. They've installed the under drain or the grout layer. They've installed the under drains, and as of today, they were up in there painting. And we have to have a certain cure period before we're allowed to put that the new media into place. And so they're shooting for having it done right around the 1st of December, which is kind of back to the original schedule that we were on when we started this project. Filter number 1 was rough, as some of the things didn't match the 1924 drawings exactly. And so they learned through that and were able to speed up as they moved through filters 2 through 4, but still provided a quality product. Again, we're trying to address this water loss issue. We've got some equipment in-house already where we can put some meters out in the system and at the water plant to verify some of the other meters that we have. It requires a tapping sleeve that is straight so that we can get this insertion meter down to the middle of the flow like we need to. These saddles have been on order since the first part of October. They were supposed to be a 10-day lead item, and we still yet to receive them. So once we get them in, then we'll get the taps made and these meters installed so that we can double check our other meters that are out in the system. North Street, phase 1's under construction. Contractor got here. We got up to about Main Street installed. There's been a couple snags along the way. Because phase 1 came in so far under budget, phase 2 was allowed to be done by MDNR using the ARPA funds. That went out to bid on the 29th of October, and the same contractor, S&A Equipment and Builders of Fulton, they were awarded that at the November 5th City Council meeting, so they'll be continuing on with that phase of the project. Phase 3 is the WRDA money, the Water Resources Development Act, money of 2022. That's where the city's responsible for designing phase 3, and then you hand that design over to the Corps of Engineers. They'll bid it and do construction management. Again, we're looking at maybe June of 2025 for that to go out to bid. So that'd be quite a bit of money invested in that North Street, Mark Twain Avenue corridor. We're hoping to get up to the Grand Avenue area with all this project. So, and then the Bear Creek Dam spillway improvements. Again, that's an ARPA funded project. We had bid opening today. We had 4 bidders. Low bid was right around $500,000. That's a little over our budget. And so I've reached out to our DNR contact and waiting to hear what our options are from that standpoint moving forward. There is a tight time frame, so Courtney will be reaching out to you. We'll probably have to have a special meeting before the end of the week just to approve or reject these bids. Right now, I scanned all the documents in, provided them to the engineer, and they're doing the due diligence on the low bidder to make sure that they meet all the qualifications and are capable of completing the job. So, Indian Mouse substation should be turning dirt maybe this week if it dries out any. The dirt work contractor was supposed to be there today. Last week, the transformer showed up at the storage site in St. Louis, and in shipment, one door gasket was damaged, and they're on the hook to get that replaced, and then it'll be ready. So whenever we need it, the contractor is ready for it up here. The contractor will move it. The storage contractor will move it up here and put it on site. We got a couple other items that are close to being complete, and we're working with the contractor, the supplier, and trying to make sure that we can meet all the time frames. And we want it here sooner. The contractor wants it here later, and so how can we make that work to where it shows up and we're not having to find a place to store it? And the last item is the tie line that's between Oakwood Substation, Southside Substation. That would allow us to close in that 34.5 loop around town, allowing us to move power in a multitude of directions and utilize both the Finn connection and the west connection at 161 to get power into town. We had applied with other MPUA cities to receive a grant to pay for that construction. That grant was not awarded, and so we're looking at different options that we have to fund that project in the future. So if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
I do have a question about the water loss. Previously, I think it was down to like 10. Would it be weather conditions that are changing it, or?
Part of the percentage is based upon the water we're producing. So as the water production goes up or down, if you're losing the same amount of water, that percentage will change. Part of it is, I think, metering, and that's what we're trying to do at the water plant. Last year we found our high service meter was inaccurate, and it was reading, didn't have it in there. I think it was reading like 250 gallon a minute low or something like that. And so as part of our filter rehab project, we had the replacement of the high service meter. Plus we also installed mag meters on the two low service lines. And we're trying to calibrate them. We've had them calibrated, but we're trying to verify that we're getting good data from them. And so I think that's the biggest obstacle we got to overcome at this point. If we can prove that those meters are accurate, that allows us to go and look other places. We've already went out and looked at, we had Fido come in and do listening on all of our valves last year. They were able to find leaks that weren't even, you had to break the bark off the pipe to see the water dripping. That's how small leaks they were finding. They found about 30 to 35 leaks. We've corrected all of those. We had another company in town this summer that listened on valves and a handful of leaks, nothing major. So then we went out and we're looking at all of our meters to make sure our meters that we have at our end use customers are actually accurate. And, you know, if we say they got a 1 inch meter, but they actually have a 2 inch meter, there's water that's being provided to a customer that we're not accounting for. So we did a check of that in the high pressure side of town, because that's where we're seeing that larger loss. And we found a few items, but nothing that is the major item. So we were able to bring it down to, I think this month it was in the mid-20s range. And with the check of the meters at the plant and checking our other meters, we're hoping to bring it down further.
We have found things that have been to our benefit. We're also finding that they're not. And so what you're seeing is that we're just adjusting to everything that's coming in. We're keeping the formulas. These guys are combing through.
We're meeting every other week with a group of Front Alpha staff, crew members, plant members, to try to come up and answer everybody's question of where we think this loss is occurring.
Every department is involved, and we're stirring it, and we're going to keep on it until we're confident that those numbers are accurate and where it needs to be.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Matt, your lead and copper letters that went out.
Yes.
Did those go out to all the customers or just the buildings built before '86?
We went out, we did a few things on that. Well, the first one was we went back to our blue sheets, when those taps were made. They have what material was used on our side of things. And we went back and found the ones that were lead or ones that weren't known. We did discount some people based upon when their subdivision was constructed. Like, trying to think, Mulhern's over here on Westover Road. I mean, it was constructed in the last few years. There's no lead there in that. And so it was a process of elimination there. We've had some people call us and say, hey, 10 years ago we replaced everything. And so we're also updating our records at that point too. And the process moving forward is we had lead, known lead service lines. We had the galvanized requiring replacement. So galvanized downstream of previous lead that the EPA says that that needs to be replaced. And then we have unknown. So the big focus over the next few years is going to be reducing that number of unknowns so we can have an accurate representation of how big the problem actually is, and then develop a plan moving forward as far as tackling the replacement in a 10-year period.
Okay, thank you.
If
Thank
it's
you.
unknown, are you guys gonna check it, or is that's on?
There's
Us?
part of it.
Okay.
Part of it is there's so many new regulations on this coming out, and we're seeing how it's playing out in certain areas because we can't. What if a homeowner or property owner doesn't want to provide us access to their crawl space or basement where that comes through their foundation? Do we have the ability to go in there? And so there's a lot of legal issues that have to be resolved. Digging on private property. Is that something, the federal government said these will be replaced, but do we actually have the authority to do so?
We believe there's still a lot of litigation going on, being pushed, and so it's very unsettled what's going to happen just yet. We do have actually 3 years before the rule kicks in that again gives us 10 years to get it done. But this is, and I think last time we talked about, there's the lead and copper rule. The lead and copper rule are revised, and then there's the lead and copper rule I, which is the improved or whatever, forget the name.
That's the most recent one.
That's the most recent one, but the letters actually went out under the lead and copper R, while the next one, it's the one that's taken. And so there's several iterations. This is something we had to do. We've done it, and we will answer questions. We're doing the best we can.
And I've talked with people that have, residences or properties in neighboring water service areas, and they've all received, majority of them has received letters from their providers as well. So
There's still a lot of questions.
Yeah, my daughter received one. She's in Ross County though.
Okay,
Unknown. Hers is unknown.
yep.
All right, anybody else have any questions of Matt?
thank you.
If not, thank you very much. Next up is Paul.
Okay, well, joining us today, we have Williams Keepers with us virtually out of Columbia, Missouri, to present our fiscal year 2024 audit, draft audit. This is the 5th year that Williams Keepers been working with us, and so we do greatly appreciate everything that they do for us and everybody that helped out with the audit. They're always very professional, very timely, and so we do appreciate them every year. With us specifically, we have Amanda Schultz. She is the partner on the engagement and has been so since year 1. And then we also have Kristen Brown. She is the manager. And then not with us today, we had Seth. I won't try to pronounce his last name, but he was the supervisor for us. So I'll turn it over now to you, Amanda.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. I'm actually going to turn it over to Kristen this time. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Paul mentioned, I'm Kristen Brown, and I was the audit manager on the audit this year. And then, like he said, Amanda is the audit partner, and she will be covering the second half of our presentation today. So, of course, we appreciate the opportunity to be able to perform the audit as well as to present the drafts of the financial statements to you all today. The first 3 pages of the financial statements are the independent auditor's report or the opinion letter. So this is the only part of the financial statements that is our responsibility as your auditors. We do plan to issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements this year. So that means, in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. So this is the best opinion that you can receive, and it means that the users of your financial statements can rely upon them. The first page of this opinion letter also includes an emphasis of matter paragraph, just to clarify that these financial statements only present the Board of Public Works and not the City of Hannibal, which we also audited again this year. So in the coming weeks, we'll issue combined financial statements that include both the board and the city, in addition to issuing these standalone financial statements for just the board. This letter also states that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. Although we prepared the financial statements, it's a common practice for us as independent auditors to do so. Management has reviewed them and will approve them before they are issued. Our responsibility as auditors is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. So we do use our judgment in determining how to audit the board. We performed a risk assessment process by reviewing balances, transactions, processes, and controls, and we focused our attention on areas where the financial statements could be misstated. So that means we didn't audit every balance or every transaction, but we did enough work in order to be able to give an opinion on the financial statements. On pages 2 and 3 of the opinion letter, we refer to some other information included in the reports. So the required supplementary information includes the management's discussion and analysis, as well as the pension and OPEB plan schedules. So this information is required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to be included in the financial statements, but we're only required to apply certain limited procedures to the information. So as a result, we won't issue an opinion or provide any assurance on these schedules. The supplementary information includes the capital asset schedules, the schedule of investments, and the schedule of top 10 utility customers. So this information was subjected to various audit procedures, and as a result, will express an unmodified or a clean opinion on it in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. And then lastly, the other information includes the comparative statements of operating factors. So this information wasn't subjected to any audit procedures, so we will not be expressing an opinion or providing any assurance on it. So following that opinion letter on pages 4 through 7 of the financial statements are the management's discussion and analysis. So this information was prepared by management to provide just an introduction to and an overview of the financial statements from the board's perspective. Following the management discussion and analysis is the actual financial statements. So the first financial statement is the statement of net position, otherwise known as the balance sheet. This is on page 8. So this statement presents each fund's assets, deferred outflows of resources, liabilities, deferred inflows of resources, and net position as of June 30th, 2024. We note that total assets decreased by about $3.1 million compared to the prior year. This is primarily due to a decrease in prepaid expenses in the electric fund as a result of decreased hedging of purchased power capacity, as well as a net pension liability being recognized in the current year compared to a net pension asset being recognized in the previous year. The deferred outflows of resources increased by $1.2 million. This was due to the GASB 68 pension plan and the GASB 75 OPEB plan balances, which are reported by the plan's actuaries and then recorded in the financial statements. Total liabilities decreased by $1.5 million, primarily due to debt service payments made on long-term debt in the current year. Deferred inflows of resources decreased by about $70,000, again due to the GASB 68 pension plan and GASB 75 OPEB plan balances reported by the actuaries. All of these changes resulted in a total net position decrease by $397,000. So the total net position of the board was $78.9 million at the current year end. $49.2 million represents your net investment in capital assets. So that is your capital assets net of any related debt issued to acquire or construct those assets. Then $3.2 million is restricted for debt service, and the remaining $26.5 million is unrestricted and may be used to meet ongoing obligations to your customers. On the following page is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, or the income statement. So this statement, again, presents each fund's operating and non-operating revenues and expenses for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Total operating revenues increased by about 1.4 million, and total operating expenses increased by about 1.2 million. This is primarily due to an increase in electric and water rates, offset by those operating expenses to support the revenues. Total non-operating revenues and expenses increased by about 1.1 million. This was primarily due to an increase in investment return in the current year. And all of those changes, again, result in a change in net position of a decrease of 397,000 in the current year. The next statement is the statement of cash flows. This is on page 10 of the report. This statement presents each fund's financial statement information just in a different format by essentially reporting where the cash came in and where the cash went out during the year. The total net change in cash and cash equivalents was a decrease of 809,000 during the year, which is much improved from a decrease of 9.7 million in the prior year, which is primarily due to a significant increase in the electric fund's capacity costs in the prior year. Any questions on those financial statements?
No, don't think so.
Okay, the last thing I'll cover are the notes to the financial statements. So note 1 on pages 11 through 14 is a summary of significant accounting policies. There was one change in accounting policy during the previous year, but this had an impact on the financial statements in the current year. This is related to a new standard regarding subscription-based information technology arrangements. We refer to them as SPITAs. So this standard essentially required a right-of-use asset and liability to be recorded related to, specific to the board, a contract for geographic information system technology contract. So there's more information in note 1 related to this standard, as well as a specific note 8 and note 9 on page 27 that just provides some more details on the impacts of that standard on the financial statements. Other than that, there were no additions or significant changes to the remaining notes. Those are on pages 15 through 27 this year. And then after the notes are the required supplementary information, the supplementary information, and the other information that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. I know I covered a lot there, but happy to answer any questions related to the financial statements specifically before I hand it over to Amanda.
Anybody have anything? I don't believe so.
All right, thank you, Kristen. So in addition to the audited financial statements, we'll be issuing 2 letters as a result of our audit. The first is the auditor's communication letter, and this letter consists of comments about the audit process and its results that we are required by our professional standards to communicate to the governing board of the auditee. A few highlights from the letter. Consistent with prior years, and I believe Kristen, mentioned this previously. I was putting those 2 words together. Our responsibility in relation to the financial statement audit is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And also consistent with prior years, the financial statement audit does include consideration of internal controls as a basis really for designing our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on internal control. So that letter really just reiterates that the purpose of a financial statement audit is to provide an opinion on those financial statements and not an opinion on internal control. There is a new comment in this year's letter that deals with independence. It explicitly states that we are independent from the Board of Public Works and the city, and that we have complied with all relevant ethical requirements regarding independence. Something that I believe was in last year's letter as well, but it's fairly new, so I wanted to point it out. Generally accepted auditing standards, or our professional standards, require us to identify and communicate any significant risks of material misstatement to those charged with governance of this board. And those standards also require us to consider management override of controls and revenue recognition as significant risks. And we did so during our audit. So that is also explicitly stated in that letter. As part of our audit, we didn't note any transactions that we considered both unusual and significant, and there were no changes in accounting policies during the year, which means that nothing was required to be accounted for or reported differently in this year's financial statements compared to prior years. Kristen just mentioned GASB 96 on SFIDAs, and that was actually a requirement for last year, but as she mentioned, had a current year impact on the financial statements. There is one change in accounting policy. It's GASB 101, titled Compensated Absences, that will be effective and will need to be implemented by the Board of Public Works and the city during fiscal year 2025, so the current fiscal year in which you're operating. This will have an impact on the financial statements, so we'll work with Paul and his team on the implementation, either before or during or a combination of next year's audit. Also, as part of our audit, we evaluated the estimates affecting the financial statements and found them reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. And the most significant estimates that affect your financial statements, which are listed in the letter, are the allowance for uncollectible receivable balances, the fair value of investments, and the OPEB and pension-related balances. We also evaluated the disclosures in the financial statements. We noted that all disclosures that are required to support the financial statements themselves were included in the notes. And the most sensitive disclosures affecting the financial statements relate to capital assets, long-term debt, and commitments and contingencies, mostly due to the significance of those balances in the financial statements. Last but not least, we had no disagreements with management on accounting or auditing issues. We had no difficulties in performing our audit, and we felt we received full cooperation from everyone that we worked with. So we certainly appreciate Darren, Paul, and their team's assistance in facilitating another smooth audit this year. The second letter that we'll issue as a result of our audit is the management letter. As I mentioned previously, the scope of our financial statement audit wasn't directed towards giving an opinion on internal control. It was directed towards giving an opinion on those financial statements. But we still considered internal control as a basis for designing our audit procedures. And based on the limited procedures we performed on the Board of Public Works internal control, we did not identify any material weaknesses or anything to bring to the level of attention that the board may need to be aware of. So I feel like I went through that fairly quickly as well. So are there any questions about any of the drafts specifically that Kristen and I went through or about the audit in general? Anything we can answer for the board this afternoon, evening?
I don't believe we have.
Okay. Well, again, we certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with you all in performing the audit and presenting the drafts to you all this evening. If any questions come up after tonight, Darren and Paul know how to get a hold of us. But as Kristen mentioned, we'll get everything issued in the coming weeks. And everything will be finalized closer to a city council meeting date, but we'll work with Paul and Darren to get everything finalized. So certainly appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for having us.
Okay, thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. I guess I will resume my financial report. I know your head's full of numbers already, so I'll try to keep this brief as possible. But starting with the balance sheet for October of 2024, just had a slight increase in cash. Also had a significant increase in payables on the balance sheet, but nothing major there. Utility-wide, total assets are slightly down from last month and are down about 2.3% from a year ago. Looking at the income statement for October, we did have a significant net loss in the electric fund of about $937,000. October is definitely a shoulder month for us, and so we do anticipate lower revenues. Every year in October, they did come in, however, slightly less than budgeted, but it was really purchase power that caused that significant net loss for us. It was about $324,000 more than we had budgeted. And The primary reason for that is we recognized 5 MISO invoices in October instead of 4. So we always have a number of months where we recognize 4, but then there's a handful of months where we recognize 5. So that happened to happen in October. Another thing I wanted to point out is that I am presenting the budget to actual reports with an updated budget that reflects the 9% rate increase rather than the 15.8 rate increase that we had originally budgeted. I did go ahead and leave in the original budget to actual report for comparison, just so you could see it as well. But I am reporting everything based on that 9% rate increase budget. The water fund also was updated since we did not do the 3% rate adjustment in that fund. So it also saw lower revenues than budgeted by about 5%. However, it still was able to recognize a positive net income, and that was because operating expenses were significantly lower than budget. The same thing occurred in the sewer fund, also had lower revenues but lower operating expenses as well. Looking back a year ago, the electric fund did perform worse this year, primarily again due to purchase power. As we've talked about over the last several months, capacity specifically is going to be highest for us in the fall and the spring, and so we recognize about $519,000 more in capacity expense alone than we did last year. Revenues obviously were higher this year due to the rate increase. But the net loss in total was about $526,000 more this year. The water fund did have a better year this year. We did recognize a carbon changeout expense last October that we did not have this October, and so that led to the better results this year. The sewer fund did better the previous year, and that was due to operating expenses in that fund, which were about $52,000 less last year. So year to date, we're now 4 months into fiscal year 2025. If we look at that budget, that reflects the 9% rate increase, and we look at a capacity that's amortized for the full year, so basically taken evenly each month. The electric fund's net loss is only about $51,000 more than what the budget would reflect. Revenue so far only about $150,000 less than budgeted. I know personally myself, I was looking at my HVAC report in my house, and it hardly ran at all in October, and so I know we did have a very mild October. Our kilowatt hour sales specifically were about 3.6% less than they were a year ago, and we're about 2.2% less than the 5-year average. The water fund is fairly close to budget. We do have operating expenses that are over by about $89,000, and the sewer fund is slightly behind budget, and that is due to revenues in that fund, which were down about $44,000 or 2% in that fund. Comparing ourselves to last year doesn't do a whole lot of good due to the rate increases, but the utility-wide net loss is about $277,000 less this year than it was last. Just drilling down into the numbers, revenues are up about 5.6%. Purchase power is up as well by about 5.3%, and operating expenses are 3% more this year utility-wide. We do have our check register, credit card statement, all those other reports for you to look at. If we scroll down to the dashboard, which is on page 66, the debt coverage ratio reflected there shows a negative 1.82 in the electric fund. The water fund is a 1.68, which is an improvement from the last month, and the sewer fund is about 4.3. Lastly, if you look at our Smart Hub subscribers, again, we've been making a big push there. Since we started that push back in, I think it was June. No, it looks like it, yeah, June. We have just about doubled the amount of customers that we have signed up for paperless billing. So I know that doesn't translate to a whole lot, but that is some savings there between postage between printing off those bills, everything that goes into that. And so we do want to recognize our customer service team and the push that they're making there to get customers signed up for paperless billing, and we appreciate them in that effort. I think that about does it. Does anybody have any questions on the financial report?
I don't. Anybody else have anything?
All right, thank you.
That's great. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along. Do we have any comments from the city attorney?
I have nothing unless the board has questions about anything.
I guess, Ethan, are you concerned about the ratio not being near what the bond agreement is?
No, I have no concern about that. I did supply a memo. I think our duty is to the customers, and I think that we're meeting that duty as per our mission statement.
So the agreement that Bill signed said we're going to do something, and you're not concerned that we're not doing it?
Which agreement specifically?
The bond covenant for the leasehold that says we have to have a current ratio of 1.25.
So every year, after speaking to Darren and Paul, every year we send to U.S. Bank what our actual ratios are. In the past 2 years, we have not been in compliance with that. And this year, we're not going to be in compliance again. Last 2 years, they have done nothing with it. And from what I was told, they haven't responded last 2 years. So assume that everything's okay. So with that being taken into consideration, I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. If so, they do got to give us a warning. But then again, you got to weigh whether we want to appease U.S. Bank or our customers. And I think our duty to the customers outweighs right now.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Any general discussion? Now, I guess we need a motion to go into closed session. And you have a list of people on there?
Yep, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021, items 1 and 12 of the Missouri Sunshine Law. The meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss litigation and contracts, admitting all board members, the board attorney, the city attorney, the mayor, Darren Gordon, Matt Munslinger, Paul Trenhale, Beverly Stewart, and Courtney Harris. Anybody else?
Second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Go red.